7:32 p.m. Fiscal quarter close. My CFO nudges a signature packet across the walnut table and, with the soft arrogance of a man who's never been told no on this floor, says, "We need your signature, sweetheart." The word lands with a hush that asks me to lower my eyes and reward the performance happening around us. The tray of champagne flutes sweating on the credenza, the skyline glazing the glass wall like a victory mural, the congratulatory emails shuttling across the display in cheerful fonts that pretend numbers are feelings. I let the scene breathe because I want the room to think it is working. I am the director of risk, which means my job is to listen for the sentence no one says out loud. And tonight it arrived at 7:29 p.m., 3 minutes before close, when our ledger smiled and claimed 7 figures from a client whose file reads like rumor, product not live, implementation unscheduled, revenue conjured with the confidence of a magic trick performed for an audience that wants to be. The vendor ID refuses to exist in any state database. The routing number points to a mailbox wedged between a bait shop and a place that wires cash without questions. And when the packet touches my side of the table, the second hand on my late aunt's pocket watch, my talisman of straight lines and unembellished time, stalls at 7:32. A stubborn pause pressed against my pulse, as if the metal itself were asking me whether I am who I say I am, when the room prefers me softer. The general counsel does that practiced tilt of the head that turns pressure into paternal guidance, cufflinks catching the pendant light like careful stars. "We'll clean it and audit," he murmurs, and then adds, "kiddo," which is the kind of sugar men pour when they need you to misplace your spine. Patronized is an old doorway, and for half a breath I consider walking through it, letting the night end on time, letting celebration swallow scrutiny, letting the bonus and the title and the next head count melt into the story we will later tell ourselves about what it takes to win. But patronage has a tell, and it sits in the small pause before the ask, that half second where everyone decides whether I am a rubber stamp or a wall. I ask for what should already be stacked in compliance: the signed MSA, completion certificate, bank confirmation of cash receipt, a revenue recognition memo that can stop duct taping controls at midnight, a real attorney for my sister's green card because he knows love is leverage and paperwork is pressure. His voice lowers into confidential velvet as he sketches the favor the client owes, the way everyone smooths a quarter end, the unwritten rule that teams are forgiven when they hit their numbers, and I watch the language repaint fraud as culture, watch the room rely on my politeness to carry them over the gap where law should live. My thumb finds the nick in my aunt's watch case, a tiny crescent from a winter long before this one, and the second hand refuses to move, a cold insistence pressing into my skin that feels like she's here, circling footers in red pencil, whispering that numbers can be loyal or obedient, and I should never confuse the second for the first. Iron resolve arrives without fanfare, just the quiet knowledge that if I sign this, I will become a person I won't be able to forgive in the mirror. So I ask him to email the off-system files to compliance and copy me, to let the paper trail breathe in daylight where adults do their jobs. The GC's eyes flicker to the glass wall, as if daylight itself were a liability. And he replies that creating discoverable material would be unhelpful optics, a phrase that prickles like static because optics is the prayer recited by men who've decided that truth is only as necessary as the room demands. Exposure begins with saying the dangerous thing out loud. So I say we need chain of custody on whatever is on his person. And that is when a cobalt flash glints from the inner pocket of the CFO's jacket, the corner of a USB catching the pendant light like a distress flare. My gaze lands, leaves, returns. He notices that I noticed, and smiles the way people do when they're sure all the exits point back to them. I name the drive and ask for it to be imaged in risk with the GC present, and he laughs too quickly and calls me thorough, which is the friendly cousin of difficult, which is the mask they use when the next step is to make me the problem. The watch stays pinned at 7:32. The emails keep chiming. Someone out in sales lets a cheer punch the air and then muffles it, embarrassed by the echo. Fear tries to teach my hand to tremble when I reach the signature tab, not because I want to remember gravity. The line is warm from the lamplight. The paper smells faintly of toner and victory. And there, rendered with the intimacy of a forgery practiced by a steady hand, are my initials already printed, my exact slant and pressure, the small flourish I tuck into the leg of the R without thinking, drawing into authority with the confidence of a future already written for me. For a long second, my mouth forgets how to move, not with surrender, but with the nausea of recognizing a version of myself arranged by other people's convenience, a legal fiction ready to outlive my protest. Then breath returns as a single level fact. They have rehearsed my consent. I lift the page into the light until the ink gleams its guilty sheen, and the room goes breathless, because my initials are already there, and we all know what it means when a signature arrives before consent. "If you want the raise, you'll sign," the CFO whispers as the office lights auto-dim, the motion sensors mistaking our stillness for absence, while his breath turns the sentence into something intimate and proprietary. As if my future were already a line item he intends to move at will. Patronized slides over the table like a linen runner. He does not reach for the forged page from earlier. He simply lets it rest between us as proof of inevitability, and begins arranging incentives with the soft precision of a maitre d' plating desire. Bass bump, performance kicker, the long-promised title with vice sutured to risk, and, set delicately at the center where conscience has to look at it, a personal introduction to immigration counsel for my sister's green card. He says, family should never be a bottleneck, the way some people say grace, and for a breath, the word family is a hand on the back urging me toward the easy chair of compliance. I refuse to sit. The general counsel edges closer, all cufflinks and calm, and lowers his voice to the registered trademark of reassurance. When I request the supporting documents, executed MSA, completion certificate, bank confirmation, revenue recognition memo, and any side letter modifying timing, he smiles as one might at a diligent niece and says the files live off-system for speed. Off-system is how vanishing acts keep their shape. I ask if confirmation bears a 2:17 a.m. send time, which, standing alone, might be insomnia, but paired with a ledger that smiles at 7:29 p.m. and a C-suite that prefers shadows, begins to feel like choreography. Exposure begins as a habit, not a headline. I ask for the invoice sequence numbers to map against AP aging. I ask for the bank's ACH trace to reconcile with the routing destination. I ask to see the pilot completion screenshots with unedited EXIF data. The CFO's composure flickers, a single frame in which his smile fails to reach its mark. He reoffers the tray, money, title, counsel, as if repetition could sedate skepticism. And then, almost tenderly, he tells me I've earned a break from being the adult in the room. The compliment tries to pin me to the carpet. It doesn't take. I leave without signing, carrying nothing but my questions and the stale perfume of celebration. The elevator releases me into a lobby that smells like polished stone and restrained triumph. Outside, February breath knifes the river, and the city's windows burn in rectangular choruses. I walk the long block home to sweat the boardroom out of my shoulders, and by the time I unlock my door, I can hear my own judgment again. My red-spined journal waits on the bookcase, a boundary I built when this job still felt like clean math. When I slide it free, the back cover catches against something hidden, a small resistance that feels intentional. The leather yields with a soft sigh, and a sealed envelope tucked deep into the gutter loosens into my hand like a stored breath finally released. The handwriting on the front is the closest thing I have to a voicemail from the dead. My aunt's loops are disciplined, careful, unafraid. I break the seal and unfold her pages at the counter the way we used to unfold takeout menus, side by side, arguing about priorities. "Follow the second hand," she writes in blue ink. "Where it stalls, someone is lying." The sentence lands like calibration, converting my talisman into an instrument. She lists signals I should expect, metronome. And then, as I reread the 2:17 a.m. email on my phone, the second hand hesitates. Not a full stall, just a hitch, like a throat clearing before testimony. It is enough to tip me back into myself. Authority-backed confidence, when it arrives, is neither loud nor theatrical. I photograph the letter for my records and slide the original into an evidence sleeve with the date and time. I open a clean spreadsheet and begin a matrix. What the quarter claims, what the documents support, what the bank can verify, what the invoices betray. I draft a preservation notice to compliance and save it to drafts, time-stamped, waiting only for me to decide whether I still believe in internal remedy before regulators become the adult in the room. I list names beside tasks and tasks beside receipts, and the simple act of ordering the mess returns my breath to an even cadence. I'm halfway through indexing invoice anomalies when my laptop pings with a calendar alert I did not create. The rectangle blooms on the screen like a white flag that expects me to salute. There is no organizer listed, no invite trail I can trace through the usual audit of logs, only a subject line written in a tone that presumes obedience, and a location that smells like bleach and plausible deniability. Warehouse walkthrough, tonight, 11 p.m., bring pen. In the loading dock's sodium light, the COO says, with the patience of a man explaining gravity to a child, "We recognize revenue when trucks move," while the pallets beside him sit so perfectly still that even the dust refuses to stir. Shrink wrap, bright as glass, and corners unbruised by travel. The calendar alert I never created led me here, back of house concrete that smells of damp cardboard, diesel, and the bleach of hurried cleanups. I arrive with my aunt's letter in my bag and her sentence steadying my breath. Follow the second hand. Where it stalls, someone is lying. Trying to keep my voice level as I thank the COO for the late tour and ask, again, for the chain of custody he keeps promising but never producing. He grins like a coach easing a rookie onto the field, thumb drumming a clipboard that supposedly answers everything, then gestures toward a rolling cart where a laptop idles with a slideshow of shipping photos, each image captioned with cheerful inevitability, "Hands at crunch time." Taps to the next frame. And again the time leads the access logs by just enough to be convenient if no one is counting. I stop pretending the romance of forklifts persuades me. The nearest pallet wears a label whose serial sings a crisp hymn to order, except the hymn repeats a few feet away on a second stack, allegedly bound for a different customer in a different city. Duplicate serials are not typos, they are templates, and templates exist to be run at speed. I photograph both stickers and the aisle markers behind them, then crouch to inspect the skids where real trips leave scuffs, but the plastic clings perfect as a showroom dress. The COO narrates floor rhythm, picks, scans, lifts, loadouts, like a nature documentary soothing the viewer through the kill. When I ask for handheld scanner exports, he assures me we can pull those later, stretching the word later until it thins to vapor. I ask for driver sign-offs. He brightens, confident he can hand me something official, then produces the clipboard with a flourish. The top sheet carries a heavy blue signature I know on sight because I sent flowers to his family last spring after a brake line took him into a guardrail. I read the name twice, as if repetition might resurrect him. Beneath that, another name sprawls at the same slope, the same impatient flourish, mimicry by a hand that understands signatures are shapes, but not that they are also time, muscle, and habit. In the margin where most people doodle, someone has penciled a string of city procurement codes, not logistic shorthand, but the bureaucratic DNA of the pilot contract hovering over our quarter, numbers that belong to council packets and committee hearings rather than a bay pretending trucks have already left. My phone vibrates. My mentor, the famed angel investor who once called me the conscience that fits in a spreadsheet, joins by speaker, his voice arriving oaken and warm, offering pride first, then perspective, then belonging as pressure. "We all smooth quarter ends," he says. "Be a team player." A blessing and a warning braided together. He recounts war stories about companies that landed the plane, that aligned ops to market reality, that earned the right to fix timing post-close. He means it kindly, which makes it more dangerous. He knows exactly how many doors his name opens, and he lets some of that light. COO's smile watches for the instant when patronized turned pliant, then offers a compromise so polite it almost passes. Paper the delta. Recognize most now. Clean the rest when everyone's less emotional. I consider who benefits from my composure and who profits from my silence. And iron resolve returns like ballast because I am tired of lending my steadiness to other people's shortcuts. I draw my red-spined journal and, in the steady handwriting my aunt taught me, log the mismatched EXIF stamps, off-site geotags, duplicate serials, forged sign-offs, stray procurement codes, absence of scanner exports, and the elasticity of later. I request, on record and within earshot of the mic on my phone, a full export of handheld scans, dock camera footage for the relevant window, and manifest handoffs with unedited metadata. The COO bristles at unedited, refuses the camera request as privacy, then pagers the warehouse lead anyway because procedure spoken aloud gains gravity. A forklift coughs awake at the far end of the bay, its reverse beeper chirping like a bird that forgot its song, and the driver glances at me, then away. The choreography of someone promised, this is normal. The forks slide under the nearest stack. Hydraulics sigh. The pallet rises chest high. From my angle I see a tugged corner where film has snagged on a staple. Beneath the stretched plastic there should be packed product, the dense geometry of value in transit. But the light pours through and finds only the dull brown echo of inner cardboard, unfilled and unweighted, a stage set waiting for actors. The COO gestures grandly for the driver to rotate, already opening his mouth to say, "See, movement!" My palm warms under the watch face as the second hand jerks once and stops in a perfect, disobedient line. The driver, obeying stage directions, lifts higher. The wrap tightens, splits with a whisper, and a box yawns open to reveal the truth we have been circling, a truth so clean it almost earns a nod. My pocket watch stalls again as the forklift lifts the shrink wrap, and the pallet turns to a neat cube of air, boxed nothing where revenue was supposed to live. "Smile," the COO says, snapping a photo of me beside the pallets as torn shrink wrap curls like manners. He suggests we loop finance because ops shouldn't police revenue philosophy. The sentence tries to turn my evidence into attitude. I say, loop them now, and I don't lower my voice. Upstairs, the finance floor smells like warm toner and citrus disinfectant. The CFO is already at a spotless table, sleeves rolled, posture relaxed like a man who has rehearsed sincerity. Between his fingers, a cobalt USB flashes like a lure under a dock. He slides it to me with 2 fingers, respectful distance staged for effect. "For your comfort," he says, and means for your containment. I don't touch it yet. I ask whether the contents are mirrored to legal and locked under hold. The general counsel loosens his tie and offers an easy smile. He proposes we walk through it together first, to avoid creating unnecessary discoverables. I plug the USB into our quarantined laptop, the one Risk keeps for truths that arrive without manners. 2 files sit in the root, twins sharing size and timestamp. One is Ledger Clean, the baby you bring to auditors. The other is Ledger Accelerated, the one you text to Momentum. I open Clean and see the story numbers tell when they are allowed to grow at human speed. I open Accelerated and watch revenue dress up for company, moving forward by days and sometimes weeks. At the top is a macro tab with a name pretending to be a joke. The label reads Sweetheart, cheerful as a poison in a candy dish. I click into the code and scroll while the room tries not to breathe. The routine is tidy and shameless, toggling deferred to recognized based on proximity to quarter close. Notes populate with customer confirmed verbally, a phrase that should never live near revenue. Dashboards downstream adjust their lights like a town changing to daylight saving. Scenario planning, the CFO says, rehearsed calm rounding each consonant. Internal modeling, the GC echoes, palms open, voice sanded down by 1,000 depositions. I screenshot the macro, the diff, the commit history. I am not surprised, But surprise is not the standard anymore. Procedure is. I draw the red spine journal from my bag like a warrant I wrote myself months ago. Time, device ID, hash before imaging, hash after imaging, file path. Boards remember people who fight momentum. He says my mentor values pragmatism over purity. The words try to tint my certainty as immaturity. I think of duplicate serials downstairs, and the dead driver's name forged by a hand that could not copy grief. The watch on my wrist ticks clean through a minute. My resolve stops asking for permission. I email compliance a preservation hold with a subject line that reads like a courtroom. Ledger_clean versus ledger_accelerated. Macro sweetheart. Present. Imaging complete. I copy the GC and the CFO and attach the hash report. I add a final sentence promising a brief for the audit committee by morning. The GC suggests we align tone before sharing. Tone is for press releases. Math already speaks plain. I return the cobalt stick to the center of the table like a borrowed light. I pocket the image twin that now weighs more than metal. The CFO asks if I feel better. I say I feel accurate. The corridor outside is too quiet for a building claiming victory. Motion sensors wake in stages, deciding I exist and then deciding I deserve fluorescence. In the elevator, my reflection carries my aunt's eyes, not because of blood, but because of decision. Downtown, the river works the pilings with patient teeth. I walk home through air that smells like iron and cold, the USB steady against my hip. In my kitchen, I lay the journal beside my aunt's letter and photograph both pages open. I label, I timestamp, I store offsite. Risk is only courage if it is documented. Otherwise, it is noise. My phone buzzes against the countertop at 12:03, the screen haloing my hand in refrigerator light. The number is unfamiliar, local, and confident. The message arrives arranged like a verdict, each word chosen to bruise without breaking skin. It does not threaten violence. It threatens narrative. It does not name names. It names ownership. I read it once, then again aloud. I hear the voice that always assumes the room belongs to it, and I feel the old mammalian flutter that wants to bow to power because power has lawyers. Audit trail won't save you. City Hall owns this. At City Hall, a council staffer smiles too bright. Partnership and momentum. A different smile appears. A procurement officer in a navy suit that fits like a decision, ushering me into a small conference room with municipal carpet and a parking lot view. He leans on the table with curated informality. "I'll be straight," he says, which is how curved sentences always begin. The pilot can be grandfathered if we stay fluid, milestones sequenced for success while the city recognizes leadership. He never says recognize revenue before you earn it. He simply treats weather like a policy tool and expects me to applaud the forecast. Patronized is the house style, but I have outgrown the wallpaper. I ask for governing documents, the executed pilot, any amendment authorizing fluidity, the acceptance criteria, and the approval chain. He nods to an aide who returns with a folder printed on heavier stock than municipal budgets usually allow. Inside lies a draft stamped internal and a signature page that should be clean. It isn't. My counter-signature waits there like a crime already solved, down to the impatient hook of my R. Placement, he offers, as if preloading consent were a clerical kindness. I don't touch the page. I lay a paperclip across the line so we both must look at the obstruction we're pretending not to see. Iron resolve stiffens the air in my chest. I trace sequence, not blame. My counterfeit initials predate the draft's version number. A clause slides in a pilot momentum stipend without council review, quietly converting public money into private cushion. The officer's smile thins. He flips to a ledger that maps donations to a council race, names I know from our cap table, marching alongside amounts that look harmless alone and corrosive together. Public record, he says, the blameless grin of legality mistaking itself for ethics. I note each entry in my red spine journal, date, time, page, and the particular way his thumb presses the ledger's edge when I read certain donors aloud. The room keeps souvenirs of alliances. On the credenza, a framed photo shows this procurement chief shoulder to shoulder with our lead investor at a groundbreaking 2 summers ago, both in pristine hard hats, both smiling like a headline already printed. I step closer under the pretense of admiring the community garden behind them. My procurement file's audit trail and transmission history. Who created, who edited, who printed. He says that will take time, a phrase that means please forget. I let the quiet ask whether he heard a question. He calls for coffee we won't drink and reaches for a different lever. A journalist appears in the doorway, the kind who moderates tech panels and flatters founders with the empathy of a biographer. I've seen her bylines soften scandals into redemption arcs. She offers a sympathetic half smile. "I've heard you're the adult in the room," she murmurs. She can protect me if I leak now, shape the narrative before bad actors do, publish a careful piece that makes me the sane center of a civic mess. She promises clean sourcing, compassionate headlines, strategic timing. The procurement officer doesn't blink, which tells me she isn't a trespasser. She's a guest. Fear tries a reversal by offering the easiest exit. Attention dressed as safety. I picture the piece, the profile photo that steals authority from the story I'm building, the quotes trimmed to sound like temperament rather than evidence. I picture the board reading it and calling me emotional. I picture the SEC reading it and calling me premature. Authority-backed confidence is choosing the right audience. I thank her, genuinely. I tell her regulators read more closely than readers, that my work is a chain of custody, not a column. She pivots to flattery, calls me brave, says she can keep me off the record until I need to be on it. Off the record is not armor, I say, when the other side is already printing t-shirts. I slip her card into my journal and log her arrival like any other variable. Source present during document review. Relationship to city unclear. Motive likely primacy. The staffer escorts me out with the same bright warmth she used to check me in. By the elevator, a trash bin's lid is propped open. Edges of discarded folders peek like tongues. I don't stop. The revolving door exhales me onto the plaza, where wind skates across stone and a city tree tries to harmonize with traffic. I sit on a bench and inventory the day for a judge who does not care about my tone. Dates, names, night shift engineer, hoodie, headphones, a coffee whose steam smells like despair. Pulls the audit console up so fast it feels rehearsed. The logs blink a neat betrayal. My credentials used at 2:17 a.m. from a conference room I have never entered, a sterile glass box on floor 18 that smells like depositions and citrus wipes. And for a long, high second, the number 217 sits in the center of the screen, like a dare my aunt already taught me how to answer. Patronized arrives disguised as help. "People leave sessions open," the engineer offers, making soothing circles with his mouse over the timeline. And when I don't nod, he adds a theory about a sticky SSO token and how we've all fat-fingered a login, which is almost tender if you ignore the way the access trail refuses to blur. There is a handshake from my laptop, a session spun up in Conf A GC, a remote desktop established, and then a mirroring event bridging my machine to a tablet labeled GC Conf, tidy enough to look innocent, until you imagine the room where someone watched my cursor move from across a table that locks behind a keycard I do not own. I ask for badge access around that time, and he pivots to a different pane, the little circles of movement pulsing along the building's spine. My badge pings the lobby at 7:54, the elevator at 7:56, and then, at 2:17 a.m., while my body was in bed scrubbing the smell of City Hall from my hair, a second Mara R. pings floor 18 at a reader that has never met my physical card. "Clone," he says, voice flattening into professional, because the word clone moves this from user error to crime, and he stops offering theories and starts taking notes. Exposure begins with the gaps, and the footage obliges.
We scrub the hallway camera outside Conf A GC and watch my absence in high definition. The recording is smooth until it isn't. A 5-minute skip puncturing the 2:14 to 2:19 window like a surgeon cutting away scar tissue. The kind of gap the system labels signal loss, and the people who profit from darkness label routine. I ask who maintains those domes, whether facilities or a vendor owns the blind spot, whether anyone else asked for a pull today. The engineer,
the vendor maintenance logs for that camera, and the ticket history for the hallway's readers. I sign my name 6 times in the kind of tight script that looks like a barricade, and email compliance a notice stamped urgent. Illicit access using cloned Cregellies. Evidence preservation required. Copying legal so the GC's inbox cannot pretend ignorance. On the way back to my floor, I cut through the quiet that office buildings wear after midnight. Printers sleeping with their mouths open, thermostats ticking like patient clocks. By the bins near the print room, a white curl of paper peeks from a black liner as if trying to breathe. I reach in and pull the scrap free, fingers ink-smudged and shaking only from anger, and the header bleeds through the tornness with bureaucratic cheerfulness. Side letter, RevRec Acceleration Q4, the kind of phrase that insists it is harmless while lengthening its shadow across your quarter. Iron resolve steadies my hands long enough to reconstruct what I can from a fragment. I flatten the strip against the glass of the copier and scan it into a PDF because evidence does not care if I slept. The scrap holds a clause number and half a sentence. Recognition shall reflect forecast provided to investors, and an initial that looks like a lazy echo of the CFO's, the tail of a C and a flourish I'd recognize in a cave. I tag the file, store it to the evidence drive, and log the find in my red-spined journal with time, location, bin number, and the engineer's name. Then send myself home because the building suddenly feels like a stage, and I do not intend to be available for rehearsal. In the rideshare, my phone buzzes with my mentor's name, the one that used to feel like weather turning in my favor. I answer because avoiding him reads like guilt in rooms where narrative replaces fact, and because the cleanest path through a bad forest is still straight. He opens with concern, all oaken warmth and paternal cadence, says he's tracking the chatter, that he can firewall me from fallout if I cooperate, if I avoid making this adversarial, if I hand over my journal for optics so no one can claim I'm running a personal investigation. He uses firewall like a shield he invented and optics like a god. He calls me invaluable and then reminds me how fragile investors. And my mouth goes dry with the polite violence of being converted from subject to prop. Fear attempts its reversal by offering me the very thing I have been denied. Safety, draped in conditional verbs. The mentor says he can line up a transition if I want a soft landing. Suggests a title at a portfolio company that values rigor without the drama. Warns me that once regulators enter the chat, the narrative control is gone. He says, give me the journal and I'll keep you out of headlines. I imagine my aunt's handwriting chained behind someone's idea of tone, and the thought drains me of the last patience I have for deals wrapped in fatherly ribbon. I thank him for the call because civility costs me little and my notes require it. Then end the connection and dictate the exchange into my evidence log while his phrases remain hot enough to brand. At my door, the hallway's quiet smells like paper and distance. The mat is tidy. The envelope is not. Authority-backed confidence is a porch light and a timestamp. A courier-sized envelope rests against my door jamb, no return address. My name printed in block letters that refuse flourish. I bring it inside, lay it on the counter beside the journal, and peel the flap open with the edge of a butter knife. Inside is a single glossy photo, 8 by 10, heavy with the arrogance of certainty. It shows me in the finance conference room, eyes on the quarantined laptop, one hand on the Cobalt USB, the other mid-gesture as if explaining the difference between math and story. In the background, the GC's tie is a blue diagonal, the CFO's sleeve a rolled confession. The lower right corner bears a timestamp that understands theater. The precise minute, ledger accelerated, toggled to dress the quarter. The same clock face I have been chasing across corridors and camera gaps like a hunter cataloging spoor. The implication is neat and vicious. Possession equals authorship equals guilt. I hold the photo up to the kitchen light and the second hand on my watch stutters, then freezes on 2:17, while the caption they intend to write for me appears in my head like a headline I refuse to wear. In a diner that smells like burnt sugar and yesterday's coffee, a junior accountant leans across a chipped Formica table and whispers, "We booked revenue on POs City Hall rejected." Ceramic and tell her I'll document without drama because paperwork is how panic loses. She explains that procurement returned several POs for revision and timing, stamping them not approved, yet our ledger smiled anyway at 7:29 p.m. She says the GC taught everyone to minimize intent, to choose verbs that float, aligned, anticipated, converging, so that actions could masquerade as weather. She recorded voice memos afterward because numbers sounded different when spoken, because she needed to hear the shape of the story we were saying out loud. I pay the bill with cash to leave no thread that pulls backward, then slip the USB into an anti-static sleeve and repeat the plan. Image first, hash before and after, off-site copy, written log. Back home, I build the lab on my kitchen counter. Quarantined laptop, evidence drive, my red spine journal open to a fresh page. The USB mounts with a cheerful chime that feels obscene. Dozens of short recordings wait inside. Q4 Huddle COO, RevRec Deck, GC Language Coach, each a small room caught in amber. I image before touching anything, generate hashes, and then press play. Chairs scrape, dry erase squeals. Someone laughs too loudly. The CFO's voice snaps into focus. We'll true up post-IPO. A chorus of mm-hms vibrates like a tuning fork. In another memo, the GC narrates revisions. Avoid verbs that suggest intention. Prefer constructions that describe market reality. Minimize intent. Exposure is music theory for fraud. I align the memo timestamps against the ledger's toggles, printing a diff of ledger clean versus ledger accelerated and taping it above the sink. The pattern resolves like sheet music. The macro labelled Sweetheart fires. Minutes later, a fundraising email lands in our lead investor's inbox. By morning, a graph floats higher than delivery. I export 3 exemplar clips: CFO true up, GC minimize intent, COO move on paper, and transcribe them with room noise intact because juries listen for texture. In my journal, I log file names, voices, verbs, and who chuckled when nobody should have. Patronize pushes through the phone as the journalist from City Hall calls again, voice wrapped in sympathy and second packet for the SEC that omits internal counsel. Preserving privilege lines, the GC will later try to redraw. The watch on my wrist keeps immaculate time, as if relieved to see process outpace performance. Across the room, the cobalt twin of the finance USB sits inside a sealed sleeve, like an object that knows its own gravity. The accountant texts a final detail I didn't know I needed. The exact moments the lead investor's emails posted to the data room, each aligned to a macro run within a breath. I add them to the timeline, and the picture clarifies its intent. Not incompetence, choreography. A message from my mentor follows almost immediately. A velvet reminder that stakeholders reward finishers, with a suggestion to share drafts so he can contextualize for investors. I reread the junior's transcripts and hear him inside them, a ghost director warming up the cast. Fear tries a reversal by offering me a softer road. The journalist promises insulation. The mentor promises a firewall. The CFO promises I can be the adult in the room if I choose the version of adulthood that signs. I think of the dead driver's forged signature, the duplicated serials, the photo timed to make possession look like authorship. I write one line in my journal that feels like a vow. I will not trade evidence for
for narrative control. The sentence steadies me more than any coffee has tonight. The rain against the fire escape agrees in its untheatrical way. Authority-backed confidence is boring on purpose. I record a read-aloud of my brief in case someone later claims tone, then print 2 copies for sealed storage. I archive the audio, hashes, and transcripts to an off-site vault and verify retrieval. I draft 3 questions for the audit committee that cannot be answered with whether. Which deliveries earned recognition? Which entries moved by macro? Which emails told investors about momentum we hadn't earned? The apartment hums with ordinary appliances doing honest work. My aunt's watch face catches the stove light and throws it back like consent withheld. The phone, which has been mercifully quiet for 8 minutes, lights again with a calendar rectangle blue as a bruise and twice as clear.
No organ spread of pastries no one intends to touch. The deck glows on a screen large enough to shame doubt. Each slide a spa day for numbers. Revenue arcs have been exfoliated into smoothness. Churn exfoliated into seasonality. Delivery delays exfoliated into learning velocity. The CEO speaks in a register pitched precisely between sermon and earnings call, promising momentum 3 times in 2 minutes, and explaining that tonight's discussion will finalize the bridge round hinged on that momentum. My late aunt's watch rests against my skin like a cool descent. Patronized arrives in compliments calibrated to sound like duty. I am thanked for my vigilance, praised for my integrity, celebrated as the person whose stamp makes investors sleep. Then the slide advances to a bar chart that resembles a skyline designed by a child who only builds up. And the CFO talks about recognition alignment, a phrase that does not blush even when paired with customer excitement. I ask for the underlying schedule that produced the curve. The boutique bank's associate at the end of the table, immaculate sock peeking from a deliberately casual ankle, assures me the model is battle-tested. The footers on the deck credit that boutique bank for presentation polish, a term that belongs on countertops, not cash flows. Iron resolve keeps my voice even as I request the raw workbook. The associate shares his screen with the air of a magician revealing an empty hat. Cells glide by in pastel order. I ask to see hidden tabs, and his cursor hesitates for a millisecond that reads as confession. One right click and the exhibition of cleanliness stumbles. A tab named Q4_fantasy blinks into view like a dare. And before he can bury it, I capture the frame on my phone with the involuntary reflex of a person who has had evidence vanish mid-sentence. He smiles with professional regret and says that tab is sandbox, a place where aspirational scenarios stretch their legs. Aspirations do not belong inside signed decks. Aspirations belong in whiteboards that stain your fingers. Exposure travels better in questions than speeches. I ask which entries in the deck come from ledger, which from forecasts, and which from the macro that moves numbers into nicer clothes. I ask who authorized the polish to migrate into the sanctified slides we send to investors. I ask whether anyone wants the minutes to reflect that the chair has seen a tab. I require the record. Section 10b-5 prohibits untrue statements of material fact, or omissions that make statements misleading in the circumstances. Moving unearned revenue forward while presenting it as recognition is not polish. It is time travel sold as truth. The bank associate says the industry normalizes strategy. The CFO adds that everyone understands quarter ends. The CEO assures the table that our customers are fully committed, even when the contracts are not fully executed. My mentor clears his throat with theatrical restraint, and the room instinctively angles toward him, the way birds tilt toward a change in weather. False ally breaks with the gentleness of a hand on a shoulder that becomes pressure. He says he's proud of my backbone, that the company needs exactly this kind of conscience, that investors respect constraint when it is aligned to outcome. Then he pivots the sentence so smoothly I almost admire it. Sign the certification, he says. We'll indemnify you. It is an offer framed as a rescue. My ethics bound inside legal gauze so the bleeding doesn't show. My name attached to a promise that won't outlast the subpoena. My safety outsourced to a blank check he can revoke the first time I stop being useful. Indemnification is not absolution. It is a bandage they hand you after they choose the knife. Fear attempts its reversal right on cue, showing me the headlines if I refuse and the cooler if I sign. I imagine the journalist writing her compassionate story about a warrior in risk who made enemies of momentum. I imagine the mentor dialing a portfolio CEO to say I am principled but impractical. I imagine the SEC attorney reading a deck whose metadata whispers fantasy, while the CEO calls me sweetheart. The watch on my wrist ticks clean through 5 seconds and then pauses. Not a stall, just a warning. The pause is enough. I inhale once, deeply enough that my ribs remember their job, and exhale into the shape of a woman who will not outsource her name. Authority-backed confidence is boring on purpose. I state for the minutes that the deck contains a hidden tab labeled Q4_fantasy, that the footer credits a boutique bank for presentation polish, that the CFO has employed a macro that reclassifies deferred revenue as recognized, and that representing such figures without clear disclosure presents material misstatement risk under 10b-5. I say I will not certify a present. Think of the empty pallets, the dead driver's forged name, the donation ledger mapping investors to a race, the photograph timed to make possession look like authorship, the macro called sweetheart, softening numbers until they forget what they weigh. Hills are made of small repeated stones. I reply that my hill is truth presented as truth. The director looks away first. The boutique bank closes his laptop like a book he plans to keep selling to other readers. The CEO's smile never goes brittle. He thanks me for my clarity, for my care, for my service to the mission. He says investors crave my voice right now, that the bridge round needs my signature to feel anchored, that I should think of myself as ballast rather than brake. The fountain pen he carries for occasions that pretend to be ceremonies appears between his fingers, sleek and heavy, a ritual object with ink dark as a closed door. He slides it across the table, slow enough to be cinematic, as if speed would insult the gravity he wants me to imagine we share. "We need your signature, sweetheart," he says, and the pen stops against my journal like a ship kissing a reef. "You'll need the SEC," I say, and place my red-spined audit journal on the table so the pen the CEO slid toward me taps its cover and stops. And the room, built for confidence and catered to denial, buckles into a silence that sounds like fabric tearing under too much weight. Patronized tries to arrive on schedule, but the cadence misses. The CEO's practiced warmth falters. The boutique banker's ankle crosses the wrong leg. The GC blinks as if resetting a teleprompter only he can see. I keep my voice level and procedural because procedure is the only language that outlives personality. I state for the minutes that I have begun internal reporting and preserved chain of custody on all materials collected to date. I slide a one-page index across the glossed wood. Evidence classes, hash values, collection times, witnesses present. The words are unadorned on purpose. I'm not asking them to believe me. I'm requiring them to see me. Iron resolve steadies my hands as I open the packet labeled Ledger Diffs. Side by side, serial number like siblings hiding under different coats, shrink wrap unscuffed, corners unbruised by miles, a forklift lifting a neat cube of air. I lay the driver sign-off on top, the dead contractor's name, written in an impatient hand that copied shape but not life. I add the warehouse camera stills with their 5-minute gap labeled signal loss, and the maintenance tickets, pulled the same day legal requested a pull for confidential review. The COO opens his mouth and then closes it, as if he has remembered how many verbs the room has already spent. I keep my rhythm. City Hall timing. The backdated visitor badge still warm from my wrist, the staffer's grandfathered if fluid, the forged countersignature placeholder, the donation ledger mapping our investors to a council race, the photo of the procurement chief with our lead investor in hard hats too clean to have met work. I read the exact minutes when emails in the council's system bounced our POs, then placed them beside our 729 entries that smiled anyway. The math, I say, has been told to look away from the calendar. The boutique banker murmurs about
public-private urgency. I write the phrase down and underline it once so it will not escape the transcript. Audio last. I announce the hashes before I hit play. Then the room hears itself. The CFO's voice, clear as weather, saying, "We'll true up post-IPO." The GC instructing, "Avoid verbs that suggest intention. Minimize intent." The COO's chuckle about moving on paper. I don't play much, no more than a minute per clip, because precision persuades, where abundance numbs. When I stop the last file, the sound of the HVAC steps forward like an embarrassed usher. "This is context," the GC tries, which is the word you use when you want meaning to forget what it just heard. "This is direction," I answer, and let the sentence sit. The board breaks formation. A director asks for a short recess to calibrate. The GC pounces on the word, declares a 10-minute break, and starts shepherding people toward the hallway, with a smile that has kept worse nights from falling apart. My mentor lingers until the door is nearly closed, then bends as if to straighten
board communications. The second goes to the SEC tips portal through the secure channel I opened last night. The ledger diffs, 3 short audio clips with transcripts, the pallet photos, the city hall timings, the cloned badge logs, the conference room RDP session that wore my name at 2:17 a.m. I do not editorialize. I do not speculate. I title the submission with dates and departments and the phrase possible 10b5 exposure. When the portal returns a matter number, I copy it by hand into my journal and circle it once. Fear attempts its reversal by showing me the future in stutters. Headlines I don't control. A mentor-shaped absence where an ally pretended to live. Recruiters turning cool. Holiday tables where relatives ask why I couldn't have been practical. Then my aunt's watch ticks through a clean minute and the room returns to its real size. I email IT to widen the preservation to devices labeled GC Conf, and to pull unedited hallway footage for the gap that called itself a signal loss. I sign the request with a signature I will not see on any forged page again. Authority-backed confidence is dull on purpose. When the board streams in with their faces reset to neutral, I sit straight, hands visible, journal open. I state for the minutes that I have initiated internal reporting, preserved evidence, and referred materials externally as required by policy and law. The GC asks me to pause externalization so we can harmonize our approach. Harmony, I say, is for choirs. I'm here for disclosure. The CEO's smile has been ironed flat, but his voice returns to its favorite register, the one that sells inevitability as kindness. "We appreciate your thoroughness," he says, and gestures toward the door. 2 security officers step in, professional and quiet, a box between them already taped at the seams with the elegance of foregone conclusions. "We're here to escort you from the premises," the taller one says, and the GC, eyes on me, voice for the minutes, adds, "Administrative leave with pay, pending completion of our review." I lift my journal so the pen's imprint dries, watch the second hand hesitate and hold, and do not move until I've written the matter number in internal reporting policy. The GC praises my thoroughness, his compliment for inconvenient, and reminds me confidentiality continues post-employment, smoothing syllables like someone petting a startled horse. I recite regulator carve-outs, then state chain of custody is preserved on ledger diffs, pallet photos, city hall timestamps, the 2:17 a.m. RDP session that wore my name, and audio clips capturing quarter-end directives. The HR director nudges water toward me, as if passing morphine. "We can navigate this amicably," she says. Amicable in this dialect means quiet. I write the word in journal. He offers severance, outplacement, a reference, non-disparagement braided with a gag, and calls the NDA a runway. Exposure arrives from the glass. His tablet lies face up, screen black as polished stone, yet at the right angle a draft headline ghosts across it. Former employee misconduct. Disgruntled actor disrupts quarter end.
I cannot read noun, but the architecture is obvious. Adjectives sanding evidence into temperament. A subhead trading facts for feelings. He flips the device face down. Then sermons about reputation risk, as if fiduciary duty were brand management. I note, for the record, that communications has a press draft before any independent finding. The HR director's pen stops mid-tap, like a heartbeat caught deliberating whether to continue today. He shifts to statute dressed as mercy. Failure to cooperate will impact severance and references, he says, smoothing later into the promise of never. I slide a preservation demand across the glass. Email, chats, device images, the tablet labeled GC-Conf, hallway video for the 214 through 219 gap, badge logs around 217. Then ask for signatures acknowledging legal hold. The HR director suggests we can keep this dignified, and I write dignified beside the minute so a reader will see which word they tried to sell. He nudges the NDA closer, calling it a runway for both sides, and waits for consent to arrive. My phone buzzes like a door opening the wrong way. The journalist who promised to protect me at City Hall has shed her wool. Off the record no longer protects you, she says. The internet by morning. I'm not courting the internet, I say. I'm courting the truth. She hangs up with surgical neatness. I narrate the call into my journal. The GC labels my note-taking provocative. Prophylactic, I answer, and keep writing. Through the aquarium wall, communications hustles past with a foam board proof. Even reversed, the headline silhouette matches his tablet's ghost. The HR director's eyes flick and return, reflex outrunning training. The GC recenters the NDA and offers a mercy. Sign, and we frame this as a divergence of style. Style is the euphemism people deploy when substance refuses domestication. I mark unacceptable beside 3 clauses, request a list of violations with custodians, and repeat my preservation demands. He promises in due course, the firm's lullaby for later. I rest palms on my journal, decline, and state that I have reported. The HR director stands as if opening a window for air that will not arrive. A security officer appears carrying a folded box and pre-torn tape, the mute theater of corporate endings entering on cue, and GC's smile resets to default reserved for inevitable things. I gather my pen, keep my journal under my arm, and watch choreography rehearse around me. Then my phone pings with the sound I saved for adults. Subject line is bureaucratic and precise. The sender domain is the one I've willed my screen to learn. Acknowledgement received. Matter number assigned. Secure upload requested within 24 hours. I host a live-streamed exit interview on the sidewalk outside our building. Tripod braced against the curb, city buses washing the audio with ordinary life. And I speak only facts I can prove while promising the rest, by matter number and deadline, to regulators who read footnotes. I begin with time, because time is the spine of honesty. I raise my aunt's watch to the lens and mark the stalls that change the room. 7:32 p.m., the second hand freezing the instant a signature packet touched my side of the boardroom table. 2:17 a.m., the minute my credentials entered a conference room my body did not. The small hitch in City Hall beside a framed photo of the procurement chief and our lead investor. Then I read a single spare paragraph from the sealed letter my aunt,
so no one can accuse me. The CFO, even voice, will true up post-IPO. The GC, diction sanded smooth. Avoid verbs that suggest intention. Minimize intent. I stop the clip, hold up the hash, and log the timestamp aloud so the stream itself becomes a record that can be tested. Breadcrumbs return in the line you can walk without imagination. I show the pallet photos from the loading dock. 2 separate shipments wearing the same cereal, shrink wrap unscarred by miles. I overlay a still of the forklift lifting a perfect cube of air, and the hallway camera export with its curious jump. 5 minutes vanished, bookending 2:17 a.m. Underneath, I tape a maintenance ticket opened within the same hour, the one legal filed when they asked IT for confidential review. I don't speculate, I stack. Sequence, not adjectives, is the way out of fog. Public stakes arrive even before I name them. Notifications flare at the top of my screen. An investor DM, "Who has the workbook?" followed by another, less polite. A news alert announces City Hall's internal review of procurement around pilot momentum, a phrase that believes changing nouns can rewind time. Minutes later, the boutique bank emails, "Bridge paused pending clarifications." I read that sentence into the mic, leave it unadorned, and let the quiet carry its weight. Behind the phone, pedestrians linger, then move on. The city keeps breathing, which steadies me more than applause ever could. Halfway through, a junior council aide slides into my DMs with coordinates no map app will disclose. Check procurement mailbox 14B. I end the stream for 20 minutes, announce that I will return, and walk 3 blocks with my watch ticking like a metronome disciplining doubt. The basement mailroom smells like paper and resignation. Box 14B holds a thick manila envelope addressed to no one. Inside, a side letter that braids donations to pilot momentum, the language coy enough to pass casual inspection and clear enough to become evidence. I photograph it in place, watermark time and location, slip it into a sleeve, and log the chain on my phone while the custodian pretends not to read over my shoulder. Back outside, fear arrives dressed as familiarity isn't. I show the preservation letters I filed, email, chat, the tablet labeled GC-Conf, hallway footage around the 5-minute gap, and the confirmation that internal reporting is open. I read 2 more lines from my aunt's letter because plainness travels. Name the sequence, refuse the fog. Then I end the live and walk to the courthouse where the clerk's window glows like a small lighthouse in a gray afternoon. Authority doesn't need volume, it needs order. I slide my folder under the glass. Internal report ID, SEC matter number, hash report, audio clip indexes, ledger diffs, City Hall timing, forklift photos, the mailbox 14B side letter, and a printout of the stream transcript stamped with the exact minutes I displayed each exhibit. The clerk listens with the patience of a traffic light and stamps a notice setting a hearing for the morning. The paper comes back warm to my hand, the ink still damp enough to smudge if I forget what I'm doing. "You'll speak first," she says. I nod because the sentence tilts the ground back beneath my feet. I sit on the courthouse steps with my bag against my knees and open the laptop to assemble the consolidated upload the SEC requested. I create a folder named with today's date and the matter number, then cue the files in the order a stranger would understand them. As I begin the checksum batch, my phone vibrates with a subject line sober enough to slow my breath. An SEC attorney writes, "We confirm receipt and attendance at tomorrow's hearing. Please upload the consolidated exhibits within 24 hours." The message ends with the matter number repeated twice, and the horizon sharpens like a ruler laid against a page. They open with theater. On the courtroom screen glows a glossy still of me stealing a Cobalt USB, hand mid-gesture, face arranged between concentration and guilt, until I ask the clerk to expand the EXIF pane and the photograph exhales its lie. The judge, a woman whose bench presence quiets oxygen, leans forward as metadata blooms beside my supposed crime. I narrate without heat because heat wastes seconds. The timestamp claims 2:17 a.m. The camera body reports a different minute. A post-export filter marks the file. The GPS pin lands 1 floor below our finance room. I request labeled GC-Conf mirroring my screen, and the maintenance ticket opened within the hour. Legal requested review. Then I lay the pallet stills. Duplicate cereals on separate shipments. Shrink wrap pulled over a cube of air like a magician's cloth missing its rabbit. Iron resolve becomes cadence the court can measure. I submit the ledger diffs. Ledger_clean beside ledger_accelerated, and the macro labeled sweetheart that slides the third to recognize precisely before investor updates. I play 13 seconds of authenticated audio, no more. The CFOs even promise, "We'll true up post-IPO," and the GC's careful instruction. Avoid verbs that suggest intention. Minimize intent. I end the clip before anyone mistakes proof for spectacle, and I look only at the bench because today authority has a face that isn't selling inevitability. Exposure completes its arc with someone else's voice. The judge denies the restraining order, noting the EXIF mismatch, the badge clone, the camera gap, and the narrowness of my public statements. She invites the SEC attorney in the gallery to address preservation and scheduling. The attorney, measured, not hungry, confirms my matter number, signals an ongoing inquiry, and requests production of the GCConf tablet. Unedited hallway video, version history for decks credited with presentation polish, and the workbook that spawned a hidden tab named Q4_fantasy. The judge orders preservation across finance, legal, and operations, then sets deadlines that sound like a drumline ending a parade. Justice arrives administrative and precise. By afternoon, the board places the CFO and GC on leave. The CEO resigns to avoid distraction. The grammar executives choose when gravity returns. City procurement opens a formal probe into pilot momentum. The boutique bank pauses the bridge, pending clarifications. A junior counsel aide who sent me to mailbox 14B texts one word: finally. And I let myself breathe all the way to the bottom of my ribs. Fear attempts a last reversal on the courthouse steps. Cameras, microphones, questions that prefer arcs to affidavits. Bono lawyer drafts a plain English preservation template. We laminate it because paper in humid rooms sags. The motifs pay their debts. I return the cobalt USBs to independent counsel with receipts that stack like stairs. I set the sealed letter back into my red spine journal, then turn to a blank page because her last line asked me to. I write the date, the judge's order, the SEC requests, the procurement docket number, and one sentence my aunt would recognize as the only theology I kept. Tell the truth in order, and the order will defend you. The watch ticks straight through 2:17 without faltering, a tiny metronome for giving the room that once demanded it stop. At dusk, I post one final, boring update, because boring is what justice sounds like when it's working. I list the court's rulings, preservation directives, administrative leaves, the formal probe, the paused bridge. I say retaliation will be documented and forwarded. I do not gloat. Shortcuts are how we arrived here. I end with the ritual I own. I hold the watch to the mic and let its seconds proofread my breath, then speak the question that brought me intact to this table. If someone slides you a pen and calls you sweetheart, will you sign? Or will you count the seconds and make them answer for each one? Back home, a certified letter leans against my door like news that would have found me anywhere. I slit it with the butter knife that's opened more envelopes than butter. Inside, the SEC requests sworn testimony, outlines whistleblower protections, names a secure room 3 Fridays from now, and repeats the matter number twice like a compass settling north. My watch ticks once, bright as a coin on porcelain, then keeps perfect time while I add today's entry and underline the hour we started over. Would you sign, or count the seconds and make them answer for each one? Sweetheart or SEC. If you've seen anything like this at work, share the pattern, no names, to shape part 2. Share this with one friend in finance, ops, city hall, subscribe with alerts on for the next chapter, and save this video as your receipt. We'll go line by line when the hearing lands.